A boot kicked the cabin door. The hermit's hand closed around the rifle. Outside in the freezing dark, a woman was begging. She was saying please. She was saying her husband couldn't walk another step. She was saying just the barn. Just the barn for one night. The hermit didn't open the door. Not yet. He stood there in the dark, with the rifle warming under his palm, and listened. Two voices. A man coughing. A woman shaking. No horses. No iron clinking. No third set of feet behind them on the path. That last part was the part that made him reach for the latch. He cracked the door 6 inches. Cold air bit his face. Two ghosts stood there in the snow. The old man called himself Tom. The woman called him husband. They said somebody was coming up the mountain behind them. Stay with me on this one. The hermit's name was Eli Crane, and he had not opened his door for a stranger in 14 years. 14 years was the count he kept. He counted it the way other men count cattle. He counted because counting kept the dates from blurring. The year his wife died. The year his boy died right after her. The year he loaded a wagon and walked it up this mountain and never walked it back down. He built the cabin with his own hands. He built the barn with his own hands. He cut the path through the lodgepole pine, and he set the stones around the spring with his own hands. Then he stopped speaking to people. That part was easy. The mountain helped him stop. He let the old couple inside, because he counted 3 things on the porch and only 3. He counted 2 pairs of boots, 2 coats, and 1 rifle that was not loaded. The old man had a Henry rifle slung across his back like a man who had carried one a long time, but the lever was rusted, and the action was open, and there was no brass in the tube. A man does not travel a mountain in winter with an empty rifle unless he ran out of things to put in it. Eli noticed that. Eli noticed everything. There was something else he noticed too. The old man's coat had been mended in 3 places along the same seam. A man whose wife is well does not have to mend the same seam 3 times. A man whose wife is sick mends it once and gets back on the road. 3 patches meant 3 winters of trying to outrun something. Eli knew the look of people who had been moving for a long time. He had been one of them once. He stepped back from the door and held it open, and motioned the 2 of them inside without saying a word. Inside the cabin, the woman could barely stand. Her name was Marin. Her lips were blue. Her hair was wet from the snow and frozen in places. The old man Tom was worse. He coughed into his sleeve, and the sleeve came back wet and dark. Eli had seen that color before. He had seen it on his wife's pillow the last week of her life. Mountain fever, or the slow consumption. Either way it meant Tom did not have many sunrises left, and the cold was going to take the rest. Eli pointed at the bench by the iron stove. The old man sat. The woman sat next to him and held his hand like she was trying to keep him from sliding off the edge of the world. Eli put a kettle on. He did not say a word. He had not said a word out loud in 11 days. He counted that too. He pulled a wool blanket off a peg on the wall. He laid it over the woman's shoulders without looking at her face. He pulled a second blanket. He laid it over the old man's lap. The old man tried to thank him. Eli held up one finger and the old man stopped. Eli did not want thanks. Eli did not want anything. He wanted to be sure of what was outside in the dark, and the cold and the trees. He went to the window and looked down the path again. The snow was filling in tracks. That was good and bad. Good because anybody on the path would have to break new snow. Bad because Eli could not see if anyone already had. The woman watched him move around the stove. She watched him pour hot water into a tin cup. She watched him crumble dried sage into the water and stir it with a spoon that was older than her. She drank when he handed her the cup. She closed her eyes. She started to cry without sound. Eli did not look at her crying. He set another cup down for the old man and turned his back and pretended to look at the window. After a while, the woman said it. She said, "Please." She said, "Please, mister, can we sleep in your barn? Just tonight. We will be gone before light. Our horses are dead. The first one broke a leg on the rock face 2 days back, and we had to leave it. The second one went down in a drift this morning. We walked the last 6 miles. We tried not to bother anybody. We tried." Eli set down the spoon. He turned around. He looked at the old man on the bench. He looked at the woman holding the old man's hand. He looked at the satchel between her feet. The satchel was a tin box wrapped in oilcloth and tied with a leather cord. The cord was knotted 6 times. A man does not knot a cord 6 times unless he is afraid of what is inside getting out, or someone outside getting in. Eli looked at the box for a long time. Then he said the first word he had spoken out loud in 11 days. He said no. The woman flinched. The old man closed his eyes like he had expected it. The woman opened her mouth to argue, but Eli held up his hand and she stopped. He said it again. He said no. Not the barn. He pointed at the floor near the stove. He said, "You sleep here. By the iron. The barn is cold, and the barn door does not latch right, and the barn is where any man hunting you would look first. You sleep inside. Tonight you sleep where the warm is. And if somebody comes up that path before sunrise, the barn is where I will be waiting for them." The woman put her face in her hands. The old man's shoulders began to shake. Eli turned away because grown people crying in front of a stranger needed privacy. He went to the corner and uncovered a wooden chest. Inside the chest were 3 things: a box of 44s, a box of 45s, and a powder horn from a rifle so old most men had forgotten the name of it. He loaded the lever action first, then the second rifle on the wall, then the small pistol he kept in his coat pocket. He worked without hurry. He had done this many times in his life. He had done it the night before Antietam. He had done it the morning his wife asked him to please go fetch the doctor faster. He knew the sound of brass sliding into chamber the way other men knew the sound of their own breathing. He took the satchel from between the woman's feet. He did not open it. He set it on the floor against the wall behind him, where his body would be between it and the door. He did not ask what was inside. He had a guess. He had a guess from the moment he saw the 6 knots. He had a stronger guess from the way the old man's eyes had gone to the satchel 3 times since he sat down. A man only looks at a thing that often if he is afraid to lose it. Eli had looked at his wife that way once. He knew what it looked like from the outside. He sat down on the chair by the door. He set the rifle across his knees. He told the woman to sleep. He told the old man to sleep. He told them both that no one was coming through that door tonight without his say-so. The old man asked him why. Why was he doing this? Why a stranger? Eli did not answer right away. He looked at the fire. He looked at the satchel between the woman's feet. He thought about the count. 14 years. Then he said one sentence. He said, "Because once a long time ago, a man let my wife sleep in his barn when she was sick on the road, and I never got to thank him before he died." The old man nodded. The woman closed her eyes. The cabin went quiet except for the wind. The hours between then and midnight passed slow. The old man drifted in and out of a thin sleep. Twice he woke up coughing, and Eli held the cup of warm water with sage to his mouth, and the old man drank without opening his eyes. The woman would not sleep. She sat upright on the bench with her hand on her husband's chest, and she watched the door. Once she asked Eli his full name. He told her. She asked if he had family. He shook his head no. She did not ask anything else after that. She understood that some questions are payment a man cannot afford to make. By midnight the old man was finally asleep on a pile of blankets by the stove. His breathing was bad, but it was steady. The woman sat up watching her husband's chest rise and fall the way a person watches a candle in a draft. Eli stood at the window with the rifle and looked down the path through the trees. The snow had thickened. The wind had laid down. The mountain felt the way a mountain feels when it is holding its breath for you. He set down the rifle. He sat on the porch step, just inside the open door. He poured himself a tin cup of coffee that had been on the stove since sundown. It was bitter and lukewarm, and it tasted like every other cup of coffee he had drunk for 14 years. He took a small sip. The snow fell soft outside. The frail man inside was finally asleep. For about 5 minutes, the mountain was the safest place on earth. Then a horse whinnied wrong below the tree line. Not lost. Hunted into position. Eli set the cup down on the porch board without making a sound. He picked up the rifle. He went back inside and closed the door without latching it. He woke the woman with one finger against his lips. He pointed at the back wall of the cabin, where a low door led into a root cellar dug into the hillside. He whispered 3 words. "Take him there." She did not ask questions. She lifted her husband under the arms. Eli helped her drag him across the floor to the cellar door. The old man groaned once. The woman shushed him like a mother shushes a child. They went down the 4 steps, and Eli closed the trapdoor over them and put a rag rug across it. Then he went to the iron stove and opened the door and threw on 2 more pine logs, so the smoke kept rising from the chimney like a man was still home and still asleep. He took both rifles off the wall and the small pistol from his coat. He stepped out the back of the cabin into the snow. He moved along the dark side of the barn to the place where the path came up out of the trees. He crouched behind a stack of split firewood. He waited. A second horse answered the first one from further down the slope. Then a third. 3 horses at least. Maybe 4. Eli listened the way a man listens for the click of a rifle hammer in the dark. He heard the soft creak of leather. He heard the muffled sound of a hand against a horse's neck, telling it to be quiet. These men were not lost. These men were not freezing. These men had taken their time coming up the mountain because they knew where they were going and they did not want to be heard. He counted them as they came. 4 men on horseback. 1 mule behind them with a coil of rope and a lantern that they had not bothered to light because they thought they were sneaking up on a sick old couple in the snow. The leader of the 4 was thick across the shoulders and wore a flat black hat and a coat with the collar turned up. He had a pistol on each hip. The other 3 rode behind him with rifles across their saddles. They came up the path quiet. They stopped about 30 yards from the cabin, and the leader raised his hand, and the others stopped behind him. The leader looked at the cabin, looked at the smoke from the chimney, looked at the barn. He swung down off his horse. He walked the last 15 yards on foot. The other 3 stayed, mounted with rifles at the ready. If you're still with me, hit that subscribe button. It tells me you want the rest of these. There is more coming, and you'll want to be here for it. The leader knocked on the cabin door. Once, then again harder. He called out a name. He called Tom Hesper. He said, "Mr. Hesper, we know you're in there." He said, "Come on out and bring the box, and nobody on this mountain has to bleed tonight." He said it like a man who had practiced saying it. He said it like a man who had said it before in other places to other people. There was a beat of silence after the second knock. Eli used that beat to look at the 3 mounted riders. He looked at their hands. He looked at the way they were sitting their horses. 2 of them were nervous. 1 was not. The one who was not had his rifle laid easy across his knee like a man who had used a rifle on a person before. That was the one Eli would watch. That was the one he would shoot first if it came to shooting. He had learned that lesson at Antietam. The man who is not nervous is the one who will kill you. The nervous ones miss. Eli waited behind the woodpile. He let the man knock a 3rd time. He let the man try the latch and find it unlocked. He let the man push the door open and step inside. He let the man stand in the doorway, looking at the empty blankets by the stove and the half-drunk tin cup on the floor. The man was just figuring out that the cabin was empty when Eli stood up from behind the woodpile and put the lever action against his shoulder and spoke for the first time all night to somebody other than the dying couple. He said, "Don't move." The three mounted men spun their horses and brought their rifles around toward the sound of his voice. The leader inside the doorway froze with his back to Eli. He raised one hand slowly. He said, "Easy, old-timer." He said, "Easy now." He said, "You don't know what you're stepping into." Eli said he knew exactly what he was stepping into. He said, "The cabin behind you is mine." He said, "The path under your boots is mine." He said, "The barn you were planning to drag those two people into is mine." He said, "You came up my mountain with rifles to do murder on two old people in my house, and you knocked on my door like a guest." He said, "I am going to count to 3, and then I am going to start shooting whichever one of you moves first." The leader said his name. He said his name was Drennan, and he was a land agent out of Cheyenne, and the couple in there were thieves, and there was a paper signed by a judge that said he could bring them back any way he had to. He said it loud so the three behind him could hear it. Then he said it again. He said, "A paper signed by a judge." Eli said, "Papers signed by judges still bleed when you fold them." He said Tom Hesper used to scout for the Union Army out of Fort Laramie, and his wife Marin ran a way station on the North Platte, and they fed every soldier and every settler and every Indian who came across that river hungry for 10 years. He said, "I knew them when my own wife was alive." He said, "I knew them when this country still had a word for decent." Drennan went very still. He had not expected the hermit to know any of that. He had come up the mountain expecting an empty cabin or a confused old man with a rusted gun. He had not expected names. He had not expected memory. Names and memory were the two things land agents could not buy in Cheyenne. Eli could see Drennan calculating the change. He could see the man's shoulders start to drop the way a man's shoulders drop when he realizes the cards in his hand are the wrong cards. Eli told the three mounted men to drop their rifles in the snow. One of them tried to bring his up. Eli put a round through the man's saddle horn from 40 feet in the dark, and the saddle horn exploded into splinters, and the horse reared, and the man slid sideways and dropped his rifle in the snow to keep from being thrown. The other two dropped their rifles a second later, without anybody having to ask twice. Drennan still had not turned around. His back was still to Eli. His one hand was still raised. The other hand was creeping slow and slow toward the pistol on his right hip. Eli could see it from behind. He could see the elbow start to bend. He told Drennan one more time not to move. Drennan kept moving. So Eli told him the rest. He said, "I know what is in that tin box. I know it because Tom told me about it 9 years ago when he and Marin came up this mountain looking for a place to hide it. I told them to keep moving because I had nothing to give anybody back then. I have carried that mistake for 9 years. Tonight is the night I put it down." Drennan asked what was in the box. Eli said the deed. Eli said the original deed to 200 sections of grazing land along the North Platte that some men in Cheyenne signed away to themselves with a forged signature from a dead governor. He said Tom Hesper kept the original because the original had the real governor's hand on it, and the real governor wrote a letter the same week saying he never signed any such thing. He said you came up here tonight to kill 2 old people for a piece of paper that proves you and 4 other men in Cheyenne are land thieves, and one of you is a murderer. He said, "Which one of you is the murderer, Drennan?" He said, "Is it you?" Drennan turned his head just enough to see Eli over his shoulder. His hand stopped moving. His face changed. It changed the way a man's face changes when he realizes the trap is not the one he was walking into. It is the one he is already standing inside. Eli could have stopped there. He could have told Drennan to drop the pistol and walk down off the mountain alive. He almost did. But he had seen Drennan's face in the cabin doorway when the man thought he was about to drag 2 sick old people out into the snow. He had seen the look. The look had not been the look of a man doing a job. It had been the look of a man enjoying it. Eli had seen that look across a campfire in Kentucky in '63 on the face of a man who later killed a boy of 15 for stealing an apple. He knew the look the way other men know the bark of a wolf. Drennan went for the pistol anyway. He was fast. He was not fast enough. Eli put one round through Drennan's right shoulder, and Drennan's pistol fell out of his hand into the snow on the cabin floor, and Drennan fell down beside it. The three mounted men did not move. They sat their horses and they watched. Eli walked out from behind the woodpile. He kept the rifle on the three. He told them to climb down off their horses slow. They did. He told them to drag Drennan out of the cabin and lay him on the path. They did. He told them to wrap a strip of cloth around Drennan's shoulder so the man would not bleed out before sunrise, because Eli was not going to be the one who killed him. They did. Drennan groaned through his teeth and called Eli names that Eli had heard at Antietam, and again at Cold Harbor, and again outside Vicksburg. None of them knew. None of them sharp anymore. Then Eli told the three riders the part that mattered. He said, "You are going to put your boss across his saddle. You are going to ride back down this mountain to Cheyenne. You are going to walk into the territorial marshal's office. Not the sheriff's office. The marshal's. There is a difference, and Drennan knows the difference. You are going to walk in there, and you are going to lay the tin box on the desk, and you are going to tell the marshal every name on every paper inside. If you do not, I will come down off this mountain and find you. One of you tried to bring his rifle up just now. I missed him on purpose. I will not miss on purpose twice." The three men nodded. The three men did exactly what they were told. They tied Drennan across his own horse. They mounted up. The mule with the lantern went first. They rode back down the path the way they came. The snow kept falling softer now. The sound of the hooves got smaller and smaller until the mountain was quiet again. One of the three turned in his saddle just before the trees swallowed them and looked back at Eli on the porch. He did not raise a hand. He did not say a word. He just looked. Eli looked back. The look between them was the kind of look that gets remembered. The rider understood he had walked into the wrong night and walked out of it alive. Eli understood the rider would not be back. That was enough of an exchange. That was the whole conversation. Then the trees closed around them, and the path was empty. Eli stood on the porch a long time after they were gone. He stood there until the gray of pre-dawn started to show along the ridge to the east. He stood there until the cold went all the way through his coat and into his bones. Then he went inside. He lifted the rag rug. He opened the trapdoor. He told the woman it was over. She helped her husband back up the steps. The old man was so weak he could barely stand, but he was still breathing, and his eyes found Eli's eyes, and the old man tried to say something, and his voice would not work. Eli waved it off. He sat the old man on the bench by the stove. He poured a fresh cup of warm water with sage. He put the cup in the old man's hand. The woman opened the tin box on the table. She showed Eli the deed. She showed Eli the letter from the dead governor. She showed Eli two other letters she had not told her husband about. One was from a Union general thanking Tom for his service at a battle Eli also remembered. The other was from a woman named Sarah, who had signed her name with a small flower next to it. Eli stared at that flower. He had not seen that handwriting in 14 years. It was his wife's sister. It was a letter she had written to the Hespers thanking them for taking his wife in one night on the road when she was sick and had nowhere to go. Eli had never known about that night. His wife had died before she could tell him. He read the letter twice. He read it the second time slow. His wife's sister had written about a snowstorm in 71 and a way station with a kerosene lamp in the window, and a woman named Marin who had given his wife dry clothes and a bed and a bowl of hot stew. His wife had been on her way home from her mother's funeral. She had been trying to get back to Eli before the worst of the weather. The letter said his wife had cried at the Hespers' table because a kind stranger had been the only kind thing in a hard month. Eli folded the letter once and laid it flat on the table and put his hand on top of it for a moment. He sat down on the bench beside the old man. He did not say anything for a long time. The fire popped in the stove. The wind had stopped. Outside, the first real light came up over the ridge and turned the snow blue, and then pink, and then white. The old man finally got his voice back. He said, "Why?" He said, "Why again?" He said, "Why did you do it?" Eli looked at the letter with the small flower. He thought about the count. 14 years. He set the count down. He let it go. He said, "Because once a long time ago, you let my wife sleep in your barn." He said, "Tonight I let yours sleep by my stove." He said, "That is how it is supposed to work in this country." He said, "Anybody tells you different is lying." The woman cried again. The old man closed his eyes and let his head rest against the wall. Eli got up and walked out onto the porch. The sun was full up now. The path through the trees was empty. The snow had covered every track. The mountain looked the way it had looked the morning he buried his wife and his boy. Quiet, patient, not unkind. Just there. He stood on the porch with both hands in his coat pockets. He did not have the rifle with him anymore. He had set it down inside by the door. He thought he would leave it there a while. Maybe a long while. He thought about the tin cup he had set on the porch board the night before. It was still there, half full, frozen solid. He picked it up and tapped the ice loose against the rail and watched the frozen disc slide off into the snow. A jay called once from the pines. Then another answered from across the draw. Ordinary sounds. Mountain sounds. The kind of sounds a man stops hearing because they were always there, and then suddenly hears again because he had not been listening. Eli stood and listened to the birds the way a man listens to music in a room he has not been allowed to enter for a long time. He drew a breath that went deeper into his chest than any breath had gone in 14 years. He went back inside. He closed the door behind him. He latched it this time. The frail couple was already asleep again by the stove, leaning against each other, the tin box on the bench between them. He pulled a chair close. He sat down. He listened to the old man breathe. Outside, the mountain held its quiet. The riders were gone. The deed would reach the marshal. The men in Cheyenne would have a long winter ahead of them. None of that was Eli's business anymore. His business was the breathing in the room and the fire in the stove, and the warm cup he was going to pour himself when his hand stopped shaking. He had answered the question. He had answered it not with yes and not with no. He had answered it with a sentence that took a whole night to finish. You don't get to choose when the past comes back up your road. You only get to choose what you do when the knock lands. He had chosen. He sat by the stove and he watched the fire, and for the first time in 14 years he stopped counting.